r/askreddit. What's a negative fact about marijuana we should know? It crosses the placenta. A lot of misinformed women don't realize this or self-medicate with weed against pregnancy pains. Can confirm. Hospitals reported to law enforcement when newborns test positive for THC, which happens frequently. I was a heavy smoker for a few years. I have my medical license and live in a state where it's legal. Got pregnant and stopped smoking. Told my doctor as I knew it would show up in pee tests for a while. They tested me my whole pregnancy. The day after my daughter was born they told me a social worker is coming in to talk to me and that they're testing my baby for THC because the nurses wrote I smoked my entire pregnancy and that it would be bad if she tested positive. My BF and I were paranoid as I had not smoked in 8-9 months and they came back hours later that everything was fine and there was miscommunication with the nurse's notes. That was the worst few hour scare of being threatened with my baby being taken away after I knew I was clean for months. And shows up in breast milk, so don't smoke if you're breastfeeding. Has there been any link between usage while pregnant and developmental disorders? I don't mean to start a new vaccines cause autism here, but it is a mind-altering drug, and a fetus's brain is fragile during its initial development. It's dangerous for dogs. Keep your stash well away from your pets. My friend's dog ate some vape leavings that fell on the floor. The dog started acting all weird, stumbling, not wanting to move and looking sick. They figured out what happened after an awkward trip to the vet. My dog once ate basically an entire brownie, so that meant chocolate and weed. I was terrified, so we called the vet, gave him a few medicines and told us to keep an eye on him. Fortunately, nothing bad happened after some hours of my dog being high as a kite. I believe it's because he used to be a stray and God knows what he used to eat, so maybe had some tolerance to something? Certain breeds have a very bad reaction to it. Know your dog and consult a vet if it eats your bud. Cannabis affects everyone differently. One person could get major anxiety relief from medicating, while another person could have an anxiety attack with the same herb. I've seen too many people try and label it a miracle drug that's the answer to all our prayers. Don't get me wrong, it's fantastic how far we've come, but stop sugarcoating it. Another person could have an anxiety attack with the same herb. That's me. AMA. To add to this, different strains vary also a lot. Added a longer comment below about differences in strains. People want to claim it's not addictive. While that may be true on a biochemical level, I'll be damned if I don't know a bunch of people that act identical to addicts when it comes to pot. Edit, Mr. Word. It's 100% able to be psychologically addictive. It's an action that has an instant reward. Yeah, I knew a guy who pretty much became a shut-in safe for going out to buy weed and food. I remember at one point when he was low on cash, he ended up selling whatever PS4 games he had at the time so he could afford a 10 bag. It was pretty depressing. A certain subsect of marijuana smokers will let it consume their life even if it's not chemically addictive. This can be wildly destructive. Like anything, consume in moderation. Edit, I know that marijuana can lead to an addiction by way of dopamine release, same as with literally everything else. I included that clause because people have started night-long arguments with me over that shit and I didn't feel like arguing with stoners through my entire shift. Exactly, I think we all know that one guy who's always high, starts forgetting time commitments, never up for doing anything besides hanging at home, the park, whatever to smoke. I think it's funny when people insist you can't get addicted to it. There are people with legitimate addictions to gambling and porn. You can get addicted to anything. Your brain is looking for the dopamine response, not necessarily the drug. Even if it's not chemically addictive. Okay, but here's the thing. People need to stop saying it's not chemically addictive, because it is. There's a whole subreddit at least that is dealing with an inability to sleep, severe depression, and problems eating, which are the withdrawal symptoms from heavy usage. Cannabis floods your body's dopamine system, which is why it makes you happy, hungry, and sleepy. The withdrawal effects can last up to months if you've been a heavy daily smoker for a long time. It's not as bad for you as alcohol or meth or whatever, but people need to stop saying it's not chemically addictive. That's just as bad as lying about it needing to be a Schedule 1 drug. This happened to me. I was literally unable to quit until I put myself into a rehab. Everyone else in the rehab constantly ridiculed me for being there because of marijuana when I was not arrested but showed up of my own free will. But I just could not stop, and that was definitely an issue in a state where it wasn't legal. I only ever lived for the next high. I couldn't leave for work in the morning, couldn't do my job in the afternoon, couldn't relax in the evening, couldn't fall asleep during bedtime unless I was high, and was smoking anywhere between 4 and 8 times a day. Each time I quit and told myself I wouldn't anymore, I got incredibly suicidal and deeply depressed. It's just like with alcohol. I can drink it and be totally fine, but there are some people who when they start drinking they will just never quit. Panic attacks. For me, and I guess many others, weed accentuates and magnifies any feelings I have prior or during the high. If I'm happy, weed makes me laugh till I cry happy. If I'm horny, weed makes me crazy horny. If I'm feeling depressed or anxious, much more sad anxious, to the point of inducing panic attacks. I have absolutely no history of panic attacks, and have only ever had them while very stoned and feeling low. It's a fucking horrible feeling though. Short of breath, become paranoid about breathing, heart rate skyrockets, sweat comes on, convince myself I could potentially have a heart attack at any moment. It spirals until I almost convince myself I'm about to die. 2 hours of manic terror. Then slowly I get my senses back and think, why the fuck do I put myself through that willingly? Sometimes weed can be good for thinking outside the box and gives me clarity on things I must do to improve as a person. Other times it can scare the living shit out of me. I guess it all depends on your state of mind. I also find when smoking in a social setting surrounded by people I like, that I never experience panic attacks. Must be related to state of mind, in that you are enjoying yourself in friends' company. Here's a comment of mine that I sent to someone else. I have been smoking for almost 2 years, and last night I had a sort of panic attack. I took a week-long break from smoking, and last night I decided to end my streak and toke up. I smoked 2 puffs and already felt stoned. But I was a fool, and decided to smoke more, and more. After 6 puffs I started feeling anxious and my heart was beating super fast. I was definitely panicking. My subconscious had taken over my mind and my thoughts were only negative. I forced myself to calm down and had a glass of water. But it was awful, and it was the first time this has ever happened to me. It could have been the strain, which was a new strain that my friend gave me that was probably a sativa with low CBD. And it was probably also my lowered tolerance. And my mom has anxiety, so I think it runs in the family. Anyway, it was a pretty bad experience and I hope it won't happen again. There's so many people who recommend weed for anxiety, and I think that's an absolutely terrible idea. I listened to this stupid advice and got a panic attack when I smoked. It was absolutely fucking horrifying. Scariest shit I ever experienced. So FFS, don't smoke if you have bad anxiety. You'll enter the fucking shadow realm. My friend used to smoke heavy at some point of his life. A few years later he stopped. He said it scared him when he came to a realization that he can barely remember any events or stuff we did together in the past few years. That's me now, and I don't smoke weed. I'm told it's a sign of severe depression. Weed causes burnout in some people. Rare smoker here. The next day is a complete write-off. I don't even feel well enough to drive after 3 puffs. People who are really into it can sometimes be really boring because they won't talk about anything else. This is a legitimate concern. Once people smoke a lot, they tend to just want to get high. Why enjoy a hike in nature if we are not smoking a fat doobie? It gets exhausting with some people. You are still inhaling smoke into your lungs, which is harmful. Edit. Yes, I'm aware that there are other ways to use weed. The fact remains that if you smoke it, which is the most widespread method of consumption, it's bad for your lungs. I feel like inhaling anything other than air into your lungs can't be good. One thing I hate about other stoners is that they can never admit to anyone that smoking weed is harmful to some aspects of our health, but the benefits I get from it outweigh the bad. For a decent percentage of the population, smoking is absolutely horrible due to how they react to it. I've seen first-timers have terrible experiences, anxiety, hallucinations, etc., and longtime smokers find that it starts to take over their life due to their dependence on it. But no, some tout it as some miracle drug that can't have any drawbacks. I find smoking weed is becoming less popular and most people I know use a dry herb vape or take edibles and drops. The only time I roll and smoke joints anymore is occasionally in social settings. I've had at least 2 pregnant friends who told me their OBGYNs told them that they could continue to smoke marijuana while pregnant. Disregard if weed itself is harmful to a fetus, you're inhaling smoke, which in itself is fucking harmful to yourself and the fetus. I'd love to hear someone's debate that it isn't. Clarification. I am a stoner, but everything has a downside. I'm just curious about what those are, since all I hear is weed is amazing. I'm totally psychologically addicted, and it's hard to quit because it's comparatively safe. Edit. And the fact everyone says that it's comparatively safe implies it's not fully safe. There are few downsides, I'm sure, but there have got to be downsides. People who are stoned are incredibly boring and irritating to be around if you're not stoned. True. But when I'm sober I'd 100% rather be around high people than a bunch of drunk people. It can trigger panic attacks in high doses. The negative part is, everyone's tolerance is different, so it's hard to say whether you'll have that experience, especially early on. Especially with homemade edibles. Start small. You eat a lot of chips, chocolate, candy, sandwiches, cheeseburgers, etc. Makes food taste amazing. Not so good when you are trying to lose a few lbs, lol. I try to find munchies that I like but healthy at the same time. Fruits when stoned is just candy from the gods. My favorites are frozen grapes and peanut butter with apples or banana. Throw in a peach or maybe some melon and now we're talking. Long-term smoking can cause IBS-like symptoms. I know quite a few tokers who also have bad stomach issues. George Carlin once gave an interview where he said marijuana is a drug that engenders its own disuse. He explained that, after a certain amount of time, the expansive, creative element of being high goes away and all that's left is the loopy, dull-witted effect. I've found this to be very true for myself. In my teens and 20s, getting stoned had this golden feel where it felt like I was thinking on a different level and the world felt more vibrant. After my mid to late 20s, that golden feeling became rare. By the time I entered my 30s, it was gone. A permanent part of the past. Nowadays, on the rare occasion when I get stoned, it's just a different form of intoxication. It's like a different flavor of being drunk, for lack of a better description. I'm not sure if this is the case for all people, or just for some. At the very least, it seems like the dull, sorta drunk vibe is good enough for a lot of people to keep going with it. For me, it isn't. Your mileage might vary, but it's important to know that the way weed makes you feel might someday change. If you smoke regularly you're still kinda spacey even when you're sober. I'm a stoner but I've gone on a few extended breaks because of it. I don't know any sources for my claim except for experience. So maybe it's just me but I doubt that. It's definitely not just you. I'm currently on a break myself and I can recall thoughts, conversations, and even past memories much better than I could while smoking. Do you have way more dreams when you're on a break? Or maybe you can just remember them where you're not baked. The smell to non-smokers is very prevalent. My mum was oblivious to what the smell was for years. She genuinely thought there was some trendy body spray because everyone in my town stunk of it. I corrected her like a fucking idiot. She thought I just had new wax. It's pretty easy to tell since you can smell it so fucking far away. I know people are stoners just by smelling them and watching THWM down a whole fucking bag of chips in 20 minutes. Then again they are also the most chill people I know, so it's fine with me. I don't smoke, but I had a stoner neighbor who smoked the cheap stuff so much that I can reliably say if a smell on the wind is weed or skunk. At least get the good stuff. Cloying sweetness is much better. All things being equal it's probably better for you than alcohol, but like anything, do enough of it and it will negatively affect you. Also, vaping is about a minute old and nobody knows how fucking terrible it is for you yet. Caveat emptor. Stoners will insist that it's not addictive, but my stoner friends can't go without it. Even on days when I ask my friends not to smoke because my parents are coming around, I catch them smoking. Even just for a day or a night or a drive, if I ask my friends not to be high, they'll be high. They claim that they could stop anytime, that they could quit one day and never go back, but I've never seen them go one day without it in the past 2 years. I don't believe for a second that marijuana isn't chemically addictive, but if they're not addicted to the chemicals, they're definitely addicted to the habit, and to me that's just as dangerous. Marijuana using teens is associated with the development of psychosis and schizophrenia in a small percentage of users. Furthermore, there is a dose-response relationship. The more marijuana consumed by the teen, the greater the risk of psychosis. It should be noted that for there to be a risk, you already have to be predisposed to it. However, the danger comes in as you are highly unlikely to know if you are or aren't as a teen unless you have a pretty detailed family history. Happened to my bro, massively schizo now. Not sure if it would have happened without the weed, but it certainly triggered or amplified it. I myself developed panic attacks that still persist 14 years after quitting this. And the evidence is very strong for the relationship between THC consumption and risk of developing psychotic symptoms. Probably as strong as it will ever get, because randomized controlled trials are unethical for this research question. It's important to know that the evidence is strongest if the MJ user started consuming THC before the age of 15. But there is also strong evidence that people that have consumed THC 3 or more times in their life have an upwards of 4x risk of developing psychotic symptoms compared to the control group, regardless of how old they were when they first consumed THC. Also, this applies to THC only, in any form, and not CBD. There is a difference between physical addiction and behavioral addiction. When people talk about being addicted to weed, they aren't saying it is physically addicting. There are potheads that are purposely obtuse when it comes to this. They know what people mean, they just choose to act like they are talking about something different. If you feel the need to intentionally misunderstand what others are saying, you might need to take a break from it for a while and re-evaluate your life choices. And no, all weed enthusiasts are potheads. I refer to the people who get really bent out of shape if you say anything other than weed is perfect and 100% risk-free. It gave me disassociation since April, and it has completely, I cannot state this enough, completely changed how you perceive and understand life. You feel like a stranger to yourself, from the world, and it's terrifying. Over time it should get better, but it can last a lifetime. It's not super common to get it, but there's a chance you will. To have your entire life outlook negatively changed for life is not worth the high. Trust me. I've been smoking almost every day since I was 18. I'm 23 now, and for me, there's quite a few negatives. My motivation suffers heavily. It's made me lazy, and the biggest issue with that is that I don't care. I go to work, come home, smoke, and sleep. Smoking weed often allows you to become comfortable with that. My memory is getting worse. I used to smoke a lot more than I do now, 5 or 6 joints a night compared to the 1 or 2 I smoke now, but I find that a lot of memories are hazy, or that I just forget simple things that others don't. Your health will suffer. I suppose this is a negative that everyone is aware of, but it's important to remember. If you're smoking it, it will affect your lungs. My father has been smoking weed for 30+ years, and was diagnosed with COPD a few years ago. He still smokes on the regular. Though this isn't the case for everyone, it can be addictive. You don't suffer the same horrific effects as those that use Class A drugs, but a craving still may be there, for the THC if nothing else. I'd say that I absolutely crave it. I can't go to bed without being stoned anymore, because I've managed to convince myself that I won't be able to sleep otherwise. Marijuana can be your friend if you smoke in moderation, so get high responsibly. I was an everyday smoker for the better part of 3 years. I had to quit cause it was fucking with my head, making me all paranoid. I've been sober 5 months now, and holy shit. The dreams I have are incredible. I would never remember my dreams when I was smoking, even if I'd go for a little tea break every now and then. But now, my dreams are insanely vivid. I often have lucid dreams and OBS now. I look forward to sleeping because of this, whereas I used to just pass out. Also, during the first month or 2 of quitting, Memories would just flood back to me. Long lost memories from years and years ago, some good, some bad, but it was scary to see just how much I had forgotten due to being high all the time. Weed is a beautiful thing. It absolutely has its time and place, and under those circumstances it can be amazing. But when you smoke every day, it loses its magic and so do you. It dulls you down, makes you content with doing nothing. I believe that anyone who says otherwise is in denial. But hey, this is all from my personal experience, so I could be completely wrong. Exactly this. There's use and there's abuse. If alcohol was treated like marijuana, it would be illegal too, because of alcoholics who abuse it instead of use it. A glass of wine or a beer is fine, but downing a bottle of Jack Daniels every morning before work isn't. Just like having a joint every weekend is fine, but having a joint every day before work isn't. Edit. If that joint before work inhibits your work, obviously. Not if you need it for medical reasons. Edit. Comparing a bottle of Jack Daniels to one joint is obviously not a fair comparison. It's more like having a beer before work versus one joint. I agree with all of what you said. Daily smoker for 4 years now. I always bailed on quitting because of sleep though. I can't for the love of God fall asleep without it anymore. Cannabis use while pregnant or breastfeeding may be harmful. Consumption of cannabis products impairs your ability to drive and operate machinery. Accessories sold separately. Batteries not included.